So thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you Maneesh and Ujjwal for coming and to host the panel as well as to speak about more on the topics about product, which is very niche segment as well as very important one. So for the attendees who are joining us for the first time, we are hosting Startup September. This is Mukesh from Headstart team, and Startup September is an initiative of Headstart for the ecosystem, by the ecosystem, and with all the major players who are working on enabling the startup and entrepreneurship in the country. Today, this is 21st day for us, and we already have hosted more than 25 programs, excluding the hustler stories and all. So if I count more, then it may be more than 35 plus or so. We already have hosted 120 plus speakers and experts who are coming from their domain with lot of expertise. Today we have Ujjwal with us, who will be moderating the session. He is the Senior Director of Product at MoveInSync and currently leading the product and growth for WorkInSync over there. He helped and managed the kiosk called hybrid workspace. You all are aware about it now. Post-pandemic, we all are into the same domain. And he's in the process of making offices great again. So Ujjwal, thank you for joining us. Also, we have Maneesh Sharma with us, the General Manager for GitHub, a passionate technologist with 20 years of professional journey of conceptualizing, building, marketing, selling, and supporting technology products. He enjoys working on strategy as well as operation roles across the function, and especially around the new products introduction and business incubation. So glad to have you both over here, and would love to learn and would love to know more about the domain. Handing over to you, Ujjwal.
Sure. Thank you so much. I hope you guys can hear me all right. All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much for giving both of us the opportunity to be talking, being part of this festival of startups, the Startup September. So great to be part of that. Thank you, Maneesh, for being part of this, and very happy to be very excited to be talking to you today. So let's begin with a little bit of your introduction and your journey. So of course, Mukesh introduced both of us, but it would be great for the audience to know more about a little more about your journey so far. So we'll take 5 minutes and run through that, and then I have a lot of questions which I would love to learn from you, and I would ask, but we would also open it up to audience, and we would be happy to take a lot of questions from you. So feel free to put it in I know what format. Yeah, chat. I think you can put it on chat, or you can put it on Q&A, and we can take those questions, and we can I would be able to see all the questions, and I would insert it in the conversation that I'm having. If you want to ask your own question, we can allow you to do that as well. So yeah, thank you so much everyone who has joined so far, and welcome to this very exciting conversation about products, about ecosystems, and about communities. So yeah, welcome Maneesh, and why don't you begin with a little bit of your journey?
Thanks, Ujjwal, and thanks, Mukesh, for inviting me. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining on a Tuesday afternoon. It's early in the week, and afternoons are always interesting, but lovely that you could join. So that's an interesting question. I think my journey has been quite meandering. It's not a straight path. I always like to share that I started coding in the last century. That's when I took my first leap into software development, and also the first leap into startups and products, way before it was cool. So, my first stint was as a product developer, way back. I won't even mention the year, but it was quite interesting at that point in time. Building products in India was very different than what it is today. It was more of a services world, more of, picking up Y2K projects and stuff like that. But having a view of, how to build products was easy. But then, how do you take it to market? How do you take it to consumers? It was a journey that I went through. After the first .com crashed and burned, I've worked in organizations like Sun and SAP, where I learned both product perfection, how do you take it to market, how do you build an ecosystem around products, and also how do you help customers sort of embrace and be successful with what you've built. I've had my trysts with startups as well, so I've done a few startups on the side just to get the passion and the creativity flowing. So I've done a startup in the books space in the NCR region. I stepped out of SAP and did a startup in the EdTech space. After we exited that company, I joined Adobe. But now when I think about it, if we had exited today, then the world would be different, right? I'll have a lot more money given that EdTech has exploded over the last 18 months. But I did a stint at Adobe working on strategy, operations, and partner ecosystem. That was also an interesting experience, getting exposed to what happens in the digital media world, what happens in the ecosystem of agencies and ads and digital marketing, which I'm sure we can talk about a little later today. But then there was an intersection of almost everything that I've been doing, which is tech, business, education, startups. That's how GitHub happened. GitHub started operations a little over a year back while we officially announced GitHub on Valentine's Day. We love developers, we love the tech ecosystem. I've been with GitHub for just about 2 years now, and excited to be working with the product, tech, and developer ecosystem in India. It's, as we say in product, it's the best product market fit, a country for developers and a product which is all about developers. So I'm having fun meeting all of you and talking about everything tech in India. So that's a long meandering story, Ujjwal.
Right. No, that's also pretty sort of, very, very different, and a lot of exposure of different kinds. So also very awe-inspiring, to be honest. And I'm more excited because then I'll get to talk about your journey, which has touched upon product, which has touched upon sales, and which has touched upon strategy, and a bunch of other things. So I would definitely have questions around that. And as I said earlier, to everyone, if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to drop on chat or on the Q&A section, and I would love to take them up as well. So to begin with, one of something that has always been close to my heart. I've been a product guy for last 8 years, and overall I've been in software for last 16 years. How do you see products transforming into platforms, and platforms transforming into ecosystems, right? So we have great examples like Apple launched a product with an ecosystem together, and then we have again a great example of GitHub, which probably started with being a community-driven sort of product. Also, there are a lot of firsts, I think, with GitHub. It is also a remote-first kind of company, right? Of course, you have some offices, but I think most of the people work remotely, and now I think that is something that people are realizing, world over, that remote can work. However, I mean, to cut the digression, coming back to tell us more about the progression from how products move to platforms and platform moves to ecosystem. I think that's a very interesting transformation for me to see as a product guy. So what can you tell us about that?
That is a very interesting and a very deep question, Ujjwal. I think this has been going on for decades now. Yeah, it's accelerated now in the digital world, but both in the physical world as well as in the software world, products and platforms have been around for a very long time. There's always been a debate, what do you build? And I think building a platform is not easy. There will be exceptions, like the one that you called out of as Apple, where you own the ecosystem and you can build a platform to get publishers and consumers together. But usually what starts off is as a product, right? Unless you build an operating system or you build databases or stuff like that, which actually help publishers build something on top of it, right? So in the olden days, whether you are an operating system like a Windows, you were having all the ISVs and all the tech providers building Windows applications so that you can get to consumers. So that was a very different world of platforms. But it's been evolving. So let me take a few examples to just explain how I think about this space. Integration between applications has always been a need, right? It's not new. Cloud integration is happening today, but way back in 25 years ago, there was always the integration brokers, which sort of evolved into enterprise service bus, right? So they were products which were solving a very distinct need of integration between applications. And these products had different integration adapters. Think about it like, I have an adapter for SAP, I have an adapter for Oracle database, another adapter for Fox Pro. So people tend to think that this is an ecosystem. It's not, right? These are just features on top of your product to make your product a little bit more viable for consumers to look at it, that these integrations are available. And a lot of the technology products across the world do that. So fundamentally, the product you is if you're solving a problem for a customer or a consumer, right? What will make the product more exciting, more valuable? There is increased usage of the product. So you focus on these features. I think it starts to evolve into a platform where you're bringing together a lot of publishers and getting them access to consumers. That's when the platform starts to evolve. And it's not always that you jump into a platform first strategy when you're starting off, right? It's usually a product that evolves into a platform. And again, there are lots of examples. Let's take communications and collaboration as a category. What we're doing on Zoom, this is a product. I wouldn't really call Zoom a platform, but I would call Slack a platform. I would call Teams a platform, because what's happening is it's not only about integrations, right? It's an ecosystem of other providers who can build on top of these platforms, right? So you have all of these other providers who have built functionality on top of Slack or on top of Teams, which you and I as consumers can start using. And there is many a times there's a dollar value associated with it as well. So the publishers are also able to thrive and consumers are getting more out of your platform. And there are enough examples. You spoke about Apple. Apple's ecosystem is complete, right? Hardware to operating system to even the distribution mechanism like an App Store or iTunes. But there are lots of other examples too. If you look at the Google AdWord network, right? Facebook, for example, let me start with Facebook, then I'll get to Google. Facebook started off with a product, right? So you can argue at that point in time, there was never a thought process that we will make this into a platform or we will make this into an ecosystem. It was a very simple product view that, hey, can we connect everybody? And it then led to, hey, if we want to look at what else we can do, why don't we open this up to advertisers and media agencies who can push ads to consumers, right? So it suddenly became a platform where you're now plugging in different providers and having consumers get to view all of these things, right? So it sort of started to evolve into platform, and then we have a lot of apps that got built on top of it. The same is true for Google as well, if you look at Google AdWords. And that leads to the ecosystem part. So ecosystem, you talked about the evolution from product to platform to ecosystem. So product is very unique, distinct, solving problems, integrations. The platform piece is where others are starting to build on top of your platform to get to consumers that you are getting to. The ecosystem, as the word suggests, is coming off of what we did in school in biology and other stuff, which is a symbiotic relationship between all the constituents of the ecosystem. And this is where the ecosystem also works together to thrive, right? And I think the example that I took of, let's say the Facebook or the Google ad networks, it's a perfect example because there are so many players now in the ecosystem. It is not only about Facebook or Google having their product and platform, which media agencies plug into. There's this whole ecosystem of digital providers, right? There's a whole ecosystem of agency. There's a whole ecosystem of designers who are building content, right? And all of this is feeding into the platform. The value of the platform is increasing. The value for the consumer is increasing because they're getting a lot of value out of them engaging with this platform. And the value for publisher is also increasing, right? Because the frictional or transactional cost of getting somebody in the ecosystem to help you build content or push applications into this platform has reduced as well. So I think that's how it evolves. It's a long and twisted answer to your question. I don't think there's a linear path. People usually follow the product to platform view.
Sure, thank you. I think that is going to be the trend. Like I will ask you short questions and I would expect long answers. So so let's continue on that part. I'm loving it. Also, I mean, I think you talked about ecosystem. So I'm also part of Headstart, and Headstart has been into helping ecosystem, enabling it, empowering it, making it self-sustaining. That has been our aim at Headstart. And yeah, I think I totally agree with the analogy that you gave, and I think that's where the world actually comes from. The biology that we studied in junior classes, that it's a lot of give and take, right? The ecosystem is all about give and take, and whenever I'm talking to startups, telling them about how to leverage this ecosystem, I always say this, that if you can give, you can take, right? So it's a great give and take, and if you can give out something, there is a lot that will return back to you in different forms, and that's why that's what gives a lot of energy to the ecosystem, and finally eventually to you and your ventures. So
You're right.
yeah, that's a beautiful point that you had put across there. All right, so moving on to the next question that I have, again, related to the products. So so we talked about the journey and how people move from product to platform to ecosystems. What can product people who are sort of managing, or founders who are managing the early stage products today, what can they do from from the beginning, right? From today, from the beginning in the early stages, what can they do to have that end game of becoming a platform or becoming an ecosystem in mind? What can they do to from the early on to get it right later? Because we've seen a lot of people trying to do it at later stages and remarkably sort of failing at that, because it doesn't like really come where you can just outsource community development to someone and not find a fitment with the product and the ethos that you have as a company and as the product. So what can they do it from the beginning to get it right?
Again, let me give you an obtuse answer again. Bringing in biology and bringing in Charles Darwin as well. It's a theory of evolution.
Right.
When you start off something as a startup, right, you're actually solving for a particular problem. And as you start working on that, getting customers, getting partners, getting feedback, you keep on improving your product, right? There will be a point in time where you might have an aha moment. Yeah, this is the platform, right? But you don't deliberately have to put pressure on yourself. No, I want to build a platform. I think it should always start with, I'm trying to solve this particular problem. For example, some startups in India and globally started off with that same integration broker problem, right? In the olden days, you had to have an enterprise service bus on premise, but in the cloud, it's easier to connect. So can I make an API framework? Once you start doing that, can I get more integrations? Once you start doing that, can I create a platform on top of it, right, to manage this API? So it has evolved. It's not as if any of these started off immediately as, no, I want to build a platform. Like, no, I want to solve this integration problem and let's start with it. And this goes back to many examples of platforms that you see today. So I took that example of, let's say, Slack and Teams, right? Initially, they were supposed to be only collaboration tools. Slack was born with, a communication tool for internal organization purposes. But then customers wanted more, customers wanted integrations, customers wanted one single place where they can do more work of other applications, whether it is DevSecOps, whether it's triggering other chatbot related work. And that's how it started to evolve into a platform. So I think we shouldn't put pressure on ourselves that I want to build a platform. It should be an evolutionary process. As you go through this process, you will discover things. And I think that's also an important point of the first question that you asked about ecosystem. The important analogy in the physical, biological world is the equilibrium. I'm sure all of us studied this in school, that the ecosystem has an equilibrium. If you change one thing, the ecosystem collapses, right? So if it is the platform suddenly changing rules of the API, rules of the game, publishers will vanish, right? If customers are not getting value out of the platform because of certain changes in the environment, they will vanish, the whole ecosystem will crash. So I think this equilibrium is very important. I'm just taking a riff on the first question as well. But again, we should not put pressure on, I'm out to build a platform. Yes, there are exceptions. As I said, I know a lot of startups in India who have started off with thinking of a marketplace, right? A marketplace is also a platform because consumers and suppliers, you're bringing them together. Right. But you have a view that you want to solve this problem because there is friction in the market. So you start building it in that world. And taking another riff on what you said as the startup ecosystem, right? Like Headstart. I think this is something which doesn't get talked about too often. I think there is an ecosystem in India and there is an equilibrium in India as well, which if you take out certain elements, the ecosystem will collapse. Or if you try to replicate in other countries, it might not really work. This is how I look at the ecosystem. So yes, we're talking a lot about startups and products today, but if you rewind, right, the famous story of how Indian tech industry started, Texas Instruments setting shop, pulling in suppliers to be closer to Texas Instruments, to be building semiconductors, then the whole services wave, which gave birth to a lot more developers starting to work. So that was the first step. Then to meet this demand, you had a lot of students starting to take up computer sciences in school and colleges. So that started to build a supply chain of developers going into these services companies. Then you also had, because of the talent that was available, you had a lot of the global companies and global innovation centers, as we GIC or GCC, they started setting up their base in India because, again, talent pool was available. And this whole ecosystem kept on evolving. And since people were working so much on code, looking at problem statements, looking at, okay, what are customers globally wanting to solve? What is the digital requirements of India? The whole ecosystem continues to evolve. So the startup world that we talk about today is very different from what it was 30 years ago, because the ecosystem has evolved. The equilibrium is still setting up, but it's good. There are a lot of catalysts that have come in over the last few years to really accelerate this process. So that was another point of view I wanted to share.
Sure, thank you. I think that was insightful. Also, while we are talking about products, the one specific thing always comes in is that in the entire transformation, I think communities that go with, so there are product communities and there are tech communities and there are all different, even business communities. But then there are, and we've seen this, that there are a lot of products that are driven by communities, and of course there is an open source entire software movement that is run by it. But even if we talk about the specific products which have forums and which have sort of a lot of which can count a community as its core strength. Of course, GitHub being one of those. Tell us a little about that. What are some good ways to build communities around products?
That's an interesting question about communities. I think let me answer it in two ways.
Sure.
There is customer loyalty and super fans, and then there is community. Right? So both are slightly distinct in my head. People sort of start to confuse the two in the digital world. In the physical world, you have your loyalty programs for a lot of things that you would be using in the physical world. I think community is all about how do you get your super fans to talk to each other and work with each other. So it's not really you as a platform or a product going out there and doing what you need to do as evangelism or as supporting customers or developers or whoever is your user. If you have super fans of yours, they are engaging on their own amongst themselves to discuss issues, to solve problems, or to help each other. I think that's where the community starts to build in. And there are lots of different shapes and sizes of these communities. I have in the past seen customer communities, right? So for example, I can give an example of SAP, where globally, every country has a SAP user group where customers come together, right? They share with each other how they are working with SAP or what kind of products that they're looking at integrating or challenges that they're facing, or just referring developers or system integrators that they can work with. It's not done by SAP, it's done by the customers themselves. So that's sort of like a user group. And there are many examples of such user groups of customers coming together and sort of working on, the tech piece of the company. The community question that you asked is specifically around, super users and developers. For example, GitHub has a large community, and it happens over a period of time. There isn't a single tactic, I would say, or a silver bullet that you would use to build community. You literally do everything. So even when I was doing a startup and trying to get more developers to integrate, we would go to Quora, answer questions, right? We would go to Hacker News, put some stuff there, all of these different messaging boards just to get our message out there so that developers and tech people can discover. I think once that starts to happen and you identify, okay, these are the pockets of super users or my initial community that I can start to nurture. And this is the first phase. When you've identified these communities, you do, if it was the physical world, pizza parties and catch-ups, coffee corner talks, which definitely help build that connect, because the whole point of the community is the connect as well amongst the community. It's starting to happen now a lot more in the digital world because everybody's realized that these things can be accelerated. And this is true in the open source world, Ujjwal, that you talked about, because in the open source world, people are never in the same city, state, country either. So a lot of these digital tools do help in building these connects. And if you see over the last 20, 30 years, there have been these conferences, right? There will be a Java conference where all the practitioners of Java come together, or a Linux conference. So these are points where you would communities come and share experiences, share a lot of these things with each other to grow. So I think you have to do all of these things together. I'm happy to point, anybody who's interested in the audience, I can point you to a lot of articles and books which really talk about how to do the community management, because there is no single bullet. They talk about a lot of these different platforms and tools, because again, you don't know where your communities will be. So they're not only the ones who are coming to conferences, they're not the only ones who are coming to Quora. So you have to be where your audiences are. Sometimes they're on Twitch, sometimes they're on Discord, sometimes they're on Slack, sometimes they're in some Quora question that they've asked, or a subreddit for sure, right? So you have to engage with everybody there. And this is always the initial phase. Once you get that momentum going, it'll pick up on its own. But the premise being that your product or platform has to be good enough, right? So it's not as if you built it and they will come. No,
absolutely.
You built it and you go out and market it and you take it to developers. But if they hate it, again, it will not work. So that equilibrium of the product platform being good, solving a problem, being easy for developers and your community to embrace, all of that has to come together. It's the perfect mix.
Right. So at this point, I have a bunch of other questions, but I see that there are a lot of founders and incubator managers also here. Could you talk a little about, we were discussing that you are trying to help startups with interns. That's one of the initiatives that you've taken up, and also a few things that you are doing to improve the education, let's call it tech literacy sort of, right, with the government of India. So why don't you throw some light on those initiatives?
Sure. That's one question I hadn't prepared for though. But see, the way I see it, as I said, the tech world in India is an ecosystem. I see GitHub as a catalyst. So purely from a developer perspective, I don't need to explain GitHub to any developer. They already know it. They're already on it. They're already coding and sharing code on it. I think for us, we can actually be catalysts in different pockets to get things going. So the first pocket is the education world, because these are future developers who are going to enter the work stream. They already know code, right? I don't think that's an issue. What as GitHub we can do is sort of get them to understand how they can work in a collaborative way, in a distributed way, because that's the real world. Even if they join an organization, whether it is, any unicorns, any ITS companies, any banks, right? You will be collaborating with different team members, right? There's the whole dev, sprints, QA, test, and repeat. So how does that work? Getting them to understand that part, getting them to understand how do you solve problems in hackathons, right? So while hackathons is a very common thing, but the problem solving piece using tech is something that they should understand. Then there's the last mile as well, which, for all the startups here would love to see how we can partner, which is they will eventually end up in either startups or any enterprise, right? So during their summer internships, is there a way for them to work on either open source projects or projects that enterprises are interested in sharing with them? It's a two-way thing as well. Students get to learn and startups get exposure to, okay, this is the talent coming out of a college. And this is, I'm not talking about, any tier 1 college, I'm talking about all colleges in India, because given where we are, anybody can be a coder and everybody's coming in from all cities in India. And, I wish I could show you the GitHub map where every city is lit up with developers contributing from there. So that's the education ecosystem. Then there's the whole professional developer ecosystem, right? Which is how can we support individual developers in getting more out of GitHub with all the features and functionality that we're releasing to make their productivity better. There is also the whole open source ecosystem. So this is a statement that a professor made to me a couple of weeks back, that we're a country of downloaders, not uploaders, right? Which is sort of a symptom of open source, where there is a lot of consumption, but not so much of contribution. So how do we build that culture right from education and in the professional ecosystem to contribute to open source? Because all of us are benefiting from it. People start to think about open source as, oh, Linux is open source or Kubernetes is open source. That is great. But even the import that you're doing when you're writing code, right? Import apache.something.log, it's an open source library. So you're suddenly participating in the open source economy. So why not give back? Because again, Ujjwal, that goes back to the ecosystem thing, right? If you're only consuming and not publishing, then the ecosystem will not thrive. So you need to really give back. So there are lots of initiatives that GitHub we're taking to sort of propel the open source ecosystem. Last week, I don't know if anybody got a chance, last week we announced winners of our 1 crore grant. So we gave grants to open source developers in India. We've also opened up sponsors. So Ujjwal can actually sponsor a developer in India working on open source, right? Because they all need financial support, because this is being done out of passion, out of their own time, effort, and sometimes money as well. So that's another thing that we're doing. And the startup question that you asked, one is me and everybody in the team supporting startups and conversations and sharing our experiences. But more importantly, GitHub as a platform is available, right? So anybody can get started. There's the whole private repositories, code collab, CI/CD that you can start doing. But at the same time, we're also partnered with lots of accelerators, incubators, and VCs to give the enterprise version of GitHub to startups. And this is what is used by the largest of the large. When you think about Spotify, when you think about Netflix, Airbnb, when you think about organizations in India as well, some of the largest ones, they're using GitHub. So startups get access to the same platform to start building scalable and secure software. So as I said, ecosystem, catalyzing each part of this ecosystem in India.
Right. I think there are a bunch of questions around, how incubators can connect with you and take some of the more information about the initiatives that you're doing for them or with them, you can maybe guide.
Yeah, I've dropped an email as well. This is Rahul. So we all have hacker names. I'm happy to share mine as well, no issues. So feel free to reach out to us. We can definitely share more stuff that we're doing with accelerators and incubators and how we can support them. Sessions like these always help to get to meet all of you. The team also does regular workshops. In fact, I think either in parallel or later today, there is a workshop being done on how you can spin up your dev environment with the click of a button in the cloud itself, right? Because that's something which developers are really interested in. So yeah, happy to share more information once you reach out to us.
Absolutely. Also, there's a very interesting question that came up. We've been talking about coding, and you've been a coder and I've been a coder, and GitHub is a coding platform for coders. This person is asking that what's your view on future of no code world, because that is starting to pick up momentum world over, not just India. What's your views on that?
So it is definitely exciting and interesting. The way I see it is every company in the world is becoming a software company, by the way.
Yeah.
So it's not only software product companies, even if you're a manufacturing company, textile company, there's software everywhere. So the need for having software developer is only going to increase, right? There is already a talent war. I'm sure all of us are reading about the stuff in the newspapers. There is going to be a lot more requirements for dev and tech as we accelerate towards the future. I see low code as a way for the net being cast wider to bring in more people to participate in the tech economy.
I totally agree with that.
The will low code come? 100%, right? Will deep code continue? 100%, right? Because in the end, if you think about it, you are abstracting layers of software development with low code. The depth is still going to be there in the backend, right? So you still need a lot of stuff going on in the backend that is going to be depth. So think of it this way: with cloud coming, has it improved or simplified the life of administrators and IT people in organizations? 100%. But at the same time, it's made it more complicated for developers in the backend to manage these fabrics of infrastructure, which are multi-cloud and working in the backend, scaling, blah, 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 blah. It's made it more complicated for them. So for the end user, for a persona, it's become more easy to participate. But in the backend, there is a lot of juggling that a developer is still doing to make things happen. So I think these platforms will definitely coexist. And it's exciting to get more and more people in the world to participate in the dev economy.
Absolutely, absolutely. Fabulous answer there. I think, yeah, I totally agree that I think no code is probably a first step towards getting people into software, and then you can't really stay away from custom code or deep code, as you called it. So that's going to happen anyways. But yeah, as as the world is moving towards more and more, like every industry becoming a software industry, every industry adopting software, I think it is going to be a great acceleration and catalyst. No code tools are going to act as a catalyst and get more and more people into the coding, into the fold of development, software development and coding.
I would love to give one more example. The WYSIWYG, I'm sure all of you know WYSIWYG.
Yeah.
It's been around for a long time, right? I remember doing a demo on, I don't know if you've used NetBeans. We used to have a demo back in many years ago where you can drag and drop button elements and it's automatically building the code in the backend and deploying your application. It was wow, right? It was amazing 15 years back, but it's normal.
Yeah.
The way you're designing mobile application screens, you're not all the time writing code, right? You're dragging and dropping, you're building that interface. That is a form of low code. But in the back end, it is generating code for you, for it to be able to run on different platforms. So that healthy mix will continue.
Great. I think there's also interesting question coming up for you, Manish. Someone's asking. So Vignesh is asking, what was your experience while working in startup versus now?
To be completely honest with you, if I had not done my startup thing, the first thing when I started off, I don't think I will be who I am, to be honest with you. The startup ecosystem is a romantic world, right? It feels that it's exciting, it's romantic, it's lovely, right? Everybody who is not in the startup feels a lot of action is happening there. But the truth is, there's a lot of learning that happens when you're in a startup, right? And when I say startup, it is a real startup. It's not when you've grown to be 5,000 employees, you're still called a startup, which many are in India, right? But I'm talking about the real startup days, because the learning that you get is immense since you get exposure to so many things. So if you are in the software engineering team, you're developing, you're shipping, you're testing, you're bug fixing, you're doing everything. So that's an exposure for you as an engineer, right? If you're in the marketing or sales department, you are writing the product features yourself, you're taking it to market, you're pitching it to customers, you're selling yourself, you're trying to figure out what the pricing should be, how you should support it. So the experience that you get early on in your career, if you're working in a startup, is immense. Because as you end up going and working in large organizations, or as your startup grows into a large organization, you usually get constricted to a particular role or a function, right? So you might only be a front-end developer, or you might only be a sales account manager, right? So you don't get to work on a lot of these things. So I think my experience, Vignesh, is working in a startup is the best thing that anybody can do. In fact, if I can be as bold, everybody who comes out of college should try to go and work in a startup first.
Cool. I think that's a really sane advice. Having worked in larger companies myself and having been working in startups for last 10 years, I think I would tell everyone the same thing, that I think both experiences are very different, and I just can't feel I would be what I am today without one of them, right? So, while big organizations teach you a lot about processes and about structure and about scale, startups, also teach you a lot about disruption, about new thinking, about being open, and it's very fierce and intense. So I think
On your toes kind of
all the
experience.
time. Right. So it's
Also on the product side, Ujjwal, I would love to share that, since I'm assuming a lot of you are product managers or building products, it's also important that you get multifunctional or multi-industry kind of experience, because then you start to appreciate a lot of aspects as you build a product. Building a product is not unidimensional, right? So you might think of a lot of ideas coming in because you did something in your past, right? The dots connect. And here's a very stupid example, but it's actually true, right? So everybody knows fonts came in Mac, right? But how did it come about? It came about because Steve Jobs suddenly had done a calligraphy class because he liked it. And then when something happened, he tried to connect the dots. So as a product manager or a product creator, having these different experiences always help, because you will get perspective of consumers who are going to consume your product.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great point. I think, we generally talk about founders and product managers to have a T-shaped sort of, personality, where they have experience with a wide scale of skills, and of course have some deep knowledge about one of them. So very valid. And I think also that leads me to one of the questions that I wanted to ask, which is that since you have been, you've seen a long journey from product to revenue to sales, to, I don't know, general management now, do tell us how selling, particularly in your last, like in the last 2 decades, how have you seen selling evolve, right? How, particularly for B2B and enterprises, how do you think it has evolved over the few years, and what works and what doesn't, some tips on that, because I'm sure a lot of B2B players here.
Oh, I think the world has changed. Fun fact is, I was a terrible coder. which is why I moved away from coding to more business and front end stuff. But I think the value of the cloud is multifold. One is definitely the whole commercial angle, which reduces the cost of entry for any, whether it's a publisher or consumer. I think reaching out to customers has been the biggest thing. And I can give you examples. When we did our startup, again, last century product startup, we literally had to go to the customer place, whether it is in Malaysia, Japan, the UAE, or the US, to demo that product. There were no Zoom calls, right? You had to physically go there and demo it. While I love traveling, I lived in Puerto Rico for almost over a year, but it's not a scalable model, right? If you want to acquire more and more customers, you need to have more and more salespeople. And it was always a constraint, having more salespeople go out, the costs of it, it's not sustainable. But look at it now, you can have inside sales, you can do demos on the phone, you can have customers come online, try and buy. So that's a big change. The other big change is nowadays in the tech world, you don't sell, you actually help the customer buy. It's a very nuanced thing, but it's a very big thing. Because since everything is SaaS, everything is online, people can go online, try out your product. And if they don't like it, move on. If they like it, get more deeper and ask questions. So I think that's a big change. I've had experiences in the past where we had to ship servers to customers, okay? And this might sound like an alien world, but I had to ship a server from Bangalore to Bombay for a customer because they want to try out something.
Right.
And it's not just the logistics of it, getting stuck in Octroy, stuff like that.
So I can totally relate to what you're saying.
That was a very shitty world, right? So those things are not a problem anymore because of the cloud. Tech is also easy. People can get started. So that's one big change. The other big change, purely from an enterprise sales perspective, I think it's become very functional now as well. So it's been going on for the last 15 years, but it has accelerated now. So if you're a front desk manager, you can take a call to buy Envoy, right? If you're an HR manager, you can go out and look at a very specific slice of an HR function. You don't have to buy an HRMS, right? So these slices of functional products for an enterprise in the SaaS world has actually made it easier for customers to discover you and customers to consume you. In the past, you had these long cycles, right? If a customer is looking for an HR system, ERP, CRM, or work health and safety, you need to budget for it. You need to have RFPs, call vendors, evaluate, and have services for delivery and then support. The costs and the effort was immense. Now, if I want something, I can just try it out, get using the product for 3 months and then decide. So that's also changed this whole sales cycle. But, people like me survive because we understand tech and business. I think that's also a very helpful skill. If you're able to sort of simplify tech, because that is changing almost every day, and just relate it back to basic stuff that a customer needs to understand. Because in the end, behind all of this is a problem-solving thing. I want to measure my employees' progress in the organization. That's the problem statement. You will solve it using tech, using lots of fancy SaaS tools, right? So I think understanding what the business needs and translating that into tech is also a very important sales skill, I would say.
No, absolutely. I think very insightful point that you're bringing here, that now that just like every industry is becoming software, all occupation are also becoming technology driven or technology assisted at least. So it is imperative that everyone sort of becomes a friend of, or makes friendship with technical terms and becomes tech savvy, right? If you're trying to sell technology, you have to be a tech, put a little bit of tech savvy yourself. And yeah, as you pointed out, it has become so easy and to sell remotely, particularly with pandemic. Everyone who thought they could not sell without having to travel so much, we've sold. And like just a point in in the case that we've sort of sold our software that we started creating last year. In last 3 months, we have got clients from 20 clients from 16 countries, right? Something for the last 1 decade, we were restricted to 3 geographies, 3 countries. We have actually expanded to 16 countries with a new software, into workplace management. And yeah, we're getting a lot of good traction from all across the world, right? Because because
It's
that's
very
how.
satisfying.
Yeah,
I know the feeling.
absolutely. So it's just enormously different. Also, so again, there's a question from an attendee who's requesting you to make a prophecy about 2022. Right, we've got 26 unicorns already. What prophecy you have for the startup ecosystem entering 2022?
I think the only prophecy I can give you that taxes will continue and they will continue to rise, right? Apart from that, everything else is open. But on a serious note, it'll only grow.
Yeah.
It's a question of ecosystem. What Ujjwal asked in the beginning, the ecosystem has become more and more mature, and there are different constituents to the ecosystem again, right? The reason a unicorn is because there is venture capital or the financial industry being able to value them.
Right.
If you were asking this question 10 years back, you did not have the venture ecosystem in India mature enough to value these companies.
Absolutely.
Right? So 15 years back, there were many companies that were exciting, right? Products were there, they were successful, they were selling all over the globe, but they could not be valued at current values because the VC ecosystem was not mature. Fast forward to now, all of these things are mature. And if you notice, a lot of these unicorn valuations have come for B2B SaaS companies of late.
Yeah.
5 years back, it was only B2C company. And the reason for that is B2B was not mature. VCs didn't understand it. Not that they were not any SaaS companies, right? They were there. So it's a question of this whole maturity coming in, and it'll only go up. It'll definitely not go down. But taxes are the only thing I can prophesy.
All right. I think we have a little bit of a time left, about 6-7 more minutes. So I'll just sneak in more, one more question that I have. Post pandemic, how have you seen, we probably touched upon this earlier also, but how are you seeing, what kind of technology trends do you see shaping up, probably because of the kind of disruption that pandemic has brought, and even otherwise, there has been some technology trends that were already, doing well, which is like AI and blockchain and stuff, crypto, and yeah, we can probably talk at length about that. But yeah, what else do you think is interesting?
I think overall everything is accelerating. It's the same, more of the same, I would say. Mm-hmm. But as they say, necessity is the mother of all inventions, right? So because of remote work, because of distributed cultures and everything coming into play, MoveInSync is an example, right? So there are new business models that are coming up to address these needs. I think it's going to be around more business models, and it's also going to be a little bit around tech. So you're starting to see these. I know the promise has been there for a long time, but the whole holo kind of experiences, the virtual experiences, being able to use VR to get into digital spaces, I think that will sort of definitely start to come in. But there are lots of interesting stuff that's happening, right? You see a lot more products and applications for collaboration, like Jamboards, like quizzes, right? Yeah. Being able to do it together. Yeah. I'm sure all of us have noticed on, I think, Netflix or Prime, there is a watch together button that is there, right? No great shake, but suddenly it is there because people are now starting to watch movies together online. Right. So I think these small things will come across to just connect us more. If you look at any of the tech predictions over the past 20, 25, 30 years, one category was always on top. It sort of, I still remember, because when I used to do the analysis, it outstripped everything else. And that is collaboration. The collaboration tools have always been the maximum spend in the world, And it's no surprise, like look at whatever is happening on Zoom, whatever is happening on Teams, whatever is happening on Slack, it's only increased. So I think more and more tools and technologies to help us collaborate better, have more business models on top of it will definitely increase.
Great. Yeah, I think that was again, a fun question, but again, thank you for a very insightful sort of response. So I'll just quickly, try to summarize, our discussion so far, and before we sort of wrap up. So we're running sort of short of time. I think there are no more audience questions that we have.
So I've successfully confused everybody, right? So they're not asking questions. That's a good thing.
I think there's one, but I'll probably skip that. So we talked about, about platforms, about products becoming platforms and then becoming ecosystems. You talked about platforms, how products are actually solving a unique problem, and then they evolve into platforms where we connect publishers to consumers, and then they are built on top of the products. And then took examples of Teams and Slack, and then you talk about ecosystem like FB ad networks, where there's a lot of give and take that kind of continues to feed into the and make things make the ecosystem more and more valuable. That participation and the contribution from everyone. Also, how it depends on the equilibrium. That is a sensitive equilibrium, which we are also sort of evolving in the Indian startup ecosystem. And then we talked about about how communities help. What are fans versus what are communities, and how super fans start helping each other to build communities, and that there are no silver bullets, and it kind of, you have to have that patience and work on all the different kinds of tools, and tactics, and have patience, and it takes time to build. And I think one of the my favorite takeaway would be that in this world you don't sell, right? You help customers buy. So I think with that, I think the last question that I have for you is that what do you read? What internet resources would you like to recommend, or what books would you like to recommend?
I think that should come with caution because it's very obtuse. I read very weird stuff. I recently read a book which is understanding, the whole world based on geography, why every country is the way it is, and that also helps understand, by the way, ecosystems.
Wow.
Why did UK grow so much? Why did US not grow? Why did Russia not grow? So how did ecosystems evolve? I think that's interesting.
Right.
I read a lot about history actually, because it's a good way of predicting the future. It might sound like a cliche, but it's definitely true. And then the usual haunts like Crunchbase, Product Hunt, to get to see what's going on. I think interacting with community like Headstart and developers and startups, actually it's more beneficial for me. I get to pick up what's happening in the ecosystem and sort of make sense of it on my own.
Right. Thank you so much. We are on top of the hour, and thanks for lovely, insightful, long-winded answers to the questions. That I totally enjoyed listening to, and could draw a lot from. So thank you so much, Maneesh, for spending time with us today. And on behalf of Headstart family, and on behalf of all the audience, I would very happy that that you were able to give us this time. And I've already shared your email ID, that is msupernaut@github.com. So people feel free to reach out to Maneesh, or OSurf, to reach out to Rahul, or OSurf at github.com. I think feel free to reach out to GitHub for anything and everything that you feel we could help you with. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Ujjwal.
Bye bye. Looking forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here.